Flight 1765. When Leadership Meets the Sky. Part 1. The Boarding Gate. Naomi Carter stood silently at Gate C-17, a boarding pass in her hand, her suitcase rolling smoothly behind her. Skyline Vista Airways Flight 1765 to San Francisco was now boarding, and a line of well-dressed passengers was flowing past the gate agent. Naomi, blending in with the other first-class travelers, was unrecognizable to those around her. That was exactly what she wanted. Naomi wasn't boarding this flight as the CEO of Skyline Vista Airways. Not today. Today, she was simply a first-class passenger named Naomi Carter, conducting one of her unannounced service audits, a tactic she had used several times to understand how her airline operated when no one knew the boss was watching. The gate agent, a young white man named Jared with gel-slicked hair and a perfunctory smile, took her boarding pass with a glance. Then he hesitated. "First class?" he asked, blinking at her, his eyes briefly scanning her dark skin, her short natural curls, her tailored but understated outfit. "Yes," Naomi replied, keeping her tone polite. Jared furrowed his brows. "May I see your ID, please?" Naomi handed over her driver's license without a word, noting that none of the passengers before her had been asked for additional identification. She watched his face as he read the name. "Naomi Carter," he murmured, the name catching like a tickle in his throat. "Yes," she said with a composed smile. "That Naomi Carter, in fact." His eyes widened slightly, then flickered away in embarrassment as he returned her documents. "Enjoy your flight, Miss Carter." She gave him a curt nod and made her way down the jet bridge, the gears in her mind already turning. This wasn't new. Subtle bias like this had met her at countless airports and conference rooms. But to experience it on her own airline, an airline she had rebuilt from a regional carrier into the fifth largest airline in America, stung in a deeper way. At 43, Naomi Carter was a symbol of triumph in an industry that had long excluded women, and especially women of color. The daughter of Jamaican immigrants, she had started as a flight attendant and worked her way through night school and middle management, eventually earning her MBA and earning a reputation for transformative leadership. But all of that didn't matter today, apparently. Not to Jared at Gate C-17. Part 2. In the cabin. Naomi settled into Seat 2A. The cabin was spotless, the lighting warm, and her tray table gleamed. She tucked her carry-on beneath the seat and watched the other first-class passengers take their seats. The crew began their pre-flight service. Coats were collected. Champagne was offered. Newspaper selections were distributed. All except to her. The flight attendant assigned to her side of the cabin, a stiffly smiling woman in her 50s named Lorna, bypassed her row entirely. Naomi raised a hand gently. "Excuse me, could I get a glass of water?" Lorna didn't stop walking. "We'll begin service once we're airborne, ma'am." Naomi blinked. "The other passengers have drinks already." Lorna turned halfway. "Those are for first-class passengers." Then, with a pointed glance, she disappeared behind the galley curtain. Naomi inhaled deeply. "I'm in first class," she whispered to herself. The man next to her in Seat 2B chuckled. He was older, white, in a sharp suit. "First time up here?" he asked, with an air of superiority. "Not quite," Naomi replied smoothly. "I travel often." He raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Gerald Matthews," he said, extending a hand. "Tech investor. Off to the AI summit." "Naomi Carter," she said. "Business meetings." There was a flicker of recognition. "Wait, Carter?" As in, before he could finish, Lorna returned with a flimsy plastic cup. "Here you go." "Thank you, Lorna," Naomi replied pointedly. "May I also have a hot towel?" "We're out," Lorna snapped. "Please prepare for takeoff." Naomi stared at the tray in silence. Part 3. The meal service. At cruising altitude, the disparities became clearer. The male attendant serving the other side of first class, Daniel, was attentive, chatty, and graceful. Lorna was cold and minimal, especially with Naomi. When it came time to select meals, Lorna leaned toward Gerald. "Would you prefer the braised short ribs or the herb-crusted salmon, Mr. Matthews?" "The short rib," Thanks, he said. Then she turned to Naomi. We have salmon or vegetarian today. What about the short rib? Naomi asked. We're running low, Lorna replied. I'd like the short rib. I'll check, she said curtly and vanished. Minutes later, she returned and delicately placed Gerald's tray before him, smiling. Then she dropped a tray in front of Naomi with a thud. We're out of the beef. Naomi peeled back the foil. Overcooked salmon. Not the presentation in the service manual. She took a photo. Later, as she returned from the lavatory, she caught Lorna and the younger attendant, Mia, whispering and glancing in her direction. Their conversation hushed as soon as Naomi approached, but she had heard enough. Upgrade passenger, doesn't belong. The rest of the flight followed the same pattern. Gerald was offered drink refills unprompted. Naomi's call button went ignored for 15 minutes. Finally, Mia passed by. Naomi stopped her. Coffee, please. Black. I'll see if we've brewed any, Mia replied. Naomi opened her laptop and began typing her observations. Gerald leaned toward her. I have to say, Miss Carter, this is astonishing. I've never seen anything like it. What are you going to do? Naomi smiled faintly. Finish my audit. Part 4, the reveal. Upon landing, as passengers stood to disembark, Lorna reached for Naomi's half-full coffee without asking. I'm still drinking this. We're preparing for landing. All beverages must be collected. The man across the aisle still has his whiskey. Lorna frowned, turned, and walked off in silence. As the cabin emptied, Naomi stood and approached the cockpit. Captain Ellis? She asked, reading the badge. Yes, he turned, pausing when he recognized her. MS. Carter. We had no idea. That was the point. I'd like the crew to remain on board for a discussion. Within minutes, the crew gathered at the front galley. Lorna's face blanched. For those who don't recognize me, Naomi began, I'm Naomi Carter, CEO of Skyline Vista Airways. The silence was deafening. Today, I receive the kind of treatment that too many of our passengers endure regularly. Disparities in service, based on nothing more than assumptions. I documented each one. Lorna bristled. With all due respect, I treated you like anyone else. No, Naomi Diplaiv. You didn't. And I have timestamps and photos to prove it. She turned to Mia. I overheard what you said about me not belonging. Care to explain? I'm sorry, Mia whispered. There's no excuse. No, Naomi agreed. There isn't. She looked to Captain Ellis. You and your first officer will complete incident reports today. Then to the crew. Lorna and Mia, you are suspended pending investigation. Lorna gasped. You're suspending us over one flight. This isn't about one flight. It's about culture. Daniel, the male attendant, stepped forward. MS. Carter, I noticed things were off. I should have said something. Accountability starts with awareness, she said. I appreciate your honesty. To be continued in the next message. Flight 1765. When Leadership Meets the Sky. Continued, Part 5 to Part 10. Approximate. 10,000 words total. Rewritten for Onmin True Vayu, as requested. Part 5, The Internal Reckoning. 2 days later, Naomi convened her executive team at Skyline Vista's San Francisco headquarters. Seated around the glass conference table were her most trusted colleagues. Marcus Yoon, COO, Candace Thompson, Head of People Va Culture, Ravi Patel, VP of Flight Operations, and a few department leads from HR and Customer Experience. What happened on Flight 1765 wasn't a service failure, Naomi began. It was a violation of our core values. Agreed, Candace nodded, tapping her tablet. We pulled crew histories. Lorna Hammond had 7 complaints over the past year, 6 of them from passengers of color, all brushed off as misunderstandings. And her supervisor? Naomi asked. Ronnie Dale, Candace said. He never reported them upstream. Then he's part of the problem. They began mapping an action plan. Revised training, new peer reporting protocols, equity metrics and employee evaluations, and most importantly, real accountability. Marcus leaned in. You know, this won't be popular in every pocket of the company. We're not here to be popular, Naomi said. We're here to be just. Part 6, The Whisper Network and the Reflection. Across the country, the news of the CEO's undercover flight rippled through crew lounges, private chat groups, and break-room gossip. Lorna, now suspended, met with her friend and fellow senior attendant Valerie. "She's setting me up as an example," Lorna said bitterly. "I gave 22 years to this company." Valerie sipped her coffee. "Were you fair to her on that flight?" "I treated her like I treat everyone." "That might be the problem," Valerie said softly. "Everyone doesn't get treated equally." At home, Mia was struggling in silence. She hadn't called colleagues. She hadn't defended herself. Instead, she dialed her grandmother, a retired nurse who'd raised her. "Abuela, I think I messed up." She recounted the story through tears. Her grandmother listened quietly, then said, "You were taught better than this. The question is, what will you do now?" Part 7, The Turning Point. Naomi received a surprising letter a few days later. It was from Gerald Matthews, her seatmate in 2B. MS. "Carter, I've been reflecting deeply since our flight. Watching what you endured and how you responded, with poise and precision, was a masterclass in leadership. My company would like to donate $50,000 to Skyline's Equity in Aviation Scholarship Fund. We're also auditing our own internal biases. Thank you for holding a mirror to us all. Gerald Matthews, CEO, Coralytics." Naomi read the letter twice, moved by its sincerity. Part 8, The Broadcast. A week later, Skyline Vista hosted a company-wide virtual town hall. Naomi's face filled the screens of thousands of employees nationwide. "I was mistaken for someone who didn't belong in first class on my own airline," she said. "But this isn't about me. It's about every customer who feels unseen, dismissed, or disrespected, without the title or power to address it." She introduced sweeping changes: a new anonymous passenger equity survey, a peer reporting tool for staff bias, mandatory annual equity training, a leadership mentoring track for underrepresented employees. "This is not a PR response," she concluded. "It's a transformation, because equity is excellence." Part 9, Accountability and Healing. HR concluded its investigation. The results: Lorna Hammond, termination due to a pattern of discriminatory conduct. Ronnie Dale, her supervisor dismissed for negligence. Mia Morales, 6-month probation with intensive bias training, mentoring, and community service. Daniel Foster, the other flight attendant, commended for stepping forward. Mia's reevaluation meeting weeks later was emotional. She'd started volunteering at an aviation program for underprivileged youth. "I let someone else's prejudice shape my behavior," she said. "But I'm not making excuses. I want to do the work. I want to do better." Naomi watched her quietly. Growth begins with owning the damage. Keep going. Part 10, 6 months later. At Skyline Vista's annual summit, Naomi stood beneath a banner that read, "One Sky, Many Voices, One Standard." She unveiled the Elevate program, a full-scale initiative to hardwire inclusion into every layer of operations, from hiring to customer feedback to crew promotion tracks. Mia, now a peer trainer, spoke briefly at the event. "I was part of the problem. Now, I'm committed to being part of the solution." In the crowd sat Jared, the gate agent who had asked Naomi for her ID. He hadn't been fired. Instead, he had gone through training and now served as a mentor for new hires. "I almost walked away after that day," he'd told HR. "But she didn't destroy me. She challenged me." In her closing words, Naomi looked at her team, her staff, and the next generation of leaders. This journey began with one flight, one injustice, one silent audit. But it doesn't end here. It ends when equity is no longer exceptional, but expected. As applause filled the room, Naomi glanced toward the framed quote on the wall behind her podium. "Justice is not what we say. It's what we do, especially when no one is watching." And with that, Flight 1765 became not just a flight number, but a legacy,